Hi, Senator Hansen.
Hi, Jack. How are you?
I'm really good. Thank you for coming out.
Oh, wow. Look at all the group. You got a lot of people.
I know, it's surprising. Just gonna let a couple more people kind of trickle in here, and then we can kind of get started.
Hi, Senator Hansen. How are you?
Very good, Mallory. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for being here. I'm so excited to talk to you.
Oh, not a problem. It's great to talk to all you guys. I have my Bernadette glasses on. That's what my husband says.
Very nice. Very nice.
Yeah. I'm like I'm on Zoom or on the computer all day long. So these really do help. You know, my eyes don't feel quite as tired at the end of the day.
Yeah, the blue light glasses, I use those too for school.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I got a pair for school too.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so it looks like we're about good. So I don't really know where to start. So Senator Hansen, do you want to kind of walk us through some of the things that the state's doing to fight climate change, just on a broad scale, and then we can kind of get into the more specific details later.
Well, for climate change, right now, DNREC and their division, they have a specific division in DNREC called the Climate Coastal Division. And there's a scientist named Susan Love that's been in charge of that. And they've been putting together Delaware's climate action plan for some time now. And originally, my understanding was that they were going to be releasing it in January. When I spoke with the secretary just a couple of days ago, he's now saying it probably isn't going to be out until the spring. So, I mean, we're all going to be watching for that very carefully. That's one of the reasons that I put together the Energy and Climate Forum, because I want that climate action plan to then be presented at the larger Energy and Climate Forum so that everybody can see it and kind of walk through what it says at this point. So we're waiting for that. I mean, I don't, government works sometimes at a slow pace, and this is one of those things.
That's true, yeah. So do you want to kind of walk us through also what happened with the RPS bill? I know the governor just signed it yesterday. I tuned into the live stream for that. So congratulations.
Thank you.
So do you want to kind of just walk us through what that means?
Sure. Well, I probably could back up a little bit, because I just tell you a little bit about me so that you know where I'm coming from and how I got involved in this. So I'm originally from downstate. I'm from Seaford, and that's where I grew up and went to high school. And then I went to college at the University of Delaware and majored in geology. And then I also got a master's degree in earth science, and then went to work for Delaware's Department of Natural Resources and Environmental Control as an environmental scientist. And I worked there for about 8 years or so. And this was back in the late 80s through the mid 90s. And during that time, I got very involved in community work, because I really thought that, I mean, it just gave me a lot of fulfillment to be able to do volunteer work on behalf of the community. So I formed an organization of civic and maintenance corporations that are up in the Route 40 corridor called the Bear Glasgow Council of Civic Organizations. And we did a lot of work with land use, bringing in a library, getting a paramedic station in the Glasgow Park, kind of really getting involved in those issues, and ended up running for president of Newcastle County Council, and I won. So I was president of Newcastle County Council from 96 to 2000. And in that period of time, we rewrote Newcastle County's land use code. And I had a lot to do with the environmental sections of the code, dealing with development in environmentally sensitive areas. Basically, Newcastle County now has probably the strongest code, I know the strongest code in the state of Delaware when it comes to being more environmentally sensitive developing in those areas, which I still think we have a long way to go. That was as good as we could do at the time, and so that's what we did. While I was on president of county council, I left my job at DENREC as an environmental scientist and went to law school. So I finished law school and finished my term on Newcastle County Council, and decided, instead of running again for Newcastle County Council, that I was just going to practice law, because I was a single parent. I had 3 little kids, and nobody should ever go into politics thinking that you're going to make money, because you don't. It's not really something you can support a family on a lot of times. So I was raising 3 kids on $30,000 a year as president of county council. So I needed to get smarter about how to take care of myself and my kids. So I began practicing law, and I was an environmental lawyer for just about 20 years, and have just recently retired. I retired in April of this year so that I could devote time specifically just to this job in the Senate, which is great. And it gives me a lot of time to really dig into some of the heavier issues. Just with this beginning of this General Assembly in November, December, I was just, actually, it was January, I was just put on as the chair of the Environment and Energy Committee. And previously, the issues related to energy and energy use in the state of Delaware had really fallen under Senator Harris McDowell's kind of purview. He was the chair of what was the Environment Committee or the Energy Committee. They'd sort of been split up in the past. He was the chair of that, and had been the chair and really the voice for energy issues in the state of Delaware for decades. I mean, a long, long time. But he just retired. So he just retired at the end of last year. Or it was actually, I think it was 2019, because we were all still able to meet in person. So he retired in 2019. And he had started this RPS bill, which is the Renewable Portfolio Standard Bill, which requires an increase in the amount of renewable energy that Delaware has in its energy mix. But he wasn't able to get it passed. And I think the reason that he wasn't able to get it passed, because he really tried to do 2 big things in that bill. He wanted to increase Delaware's percentage of renewable energy, and he also wanted to create community solar authorities. And there was general agreement at the time. I remember back in 2019 when we were talking about this, there was general agreement about the raising the RPS up to 40%, which is what that bill wanted them to do. But because the idea of community solar was new and no one had really heard of it before, people were really trying to figure out what it meant. And by that, I meant like the public advocate hadn't really taken a look at it. The Department of Natural Resources hadn't really taken a look at it. There were a lot of big governmental agencies that were going to be in charge of having some piece of these. And they really hadn't had enough time to review what they do. And so there wasn't he didn't have the thought at the time that he wanted to break those 2 pieces up. And so instead of getting the RPS done and then dealing with community solar another time, the whole thing just died. And then we couldn't get to it last year because of COVID. Our General Assembly session was curtailed, and the only things that we could get through really were just those things that were related to COVID. And this wasn't, unfortunately. So then we come up to this year. So I was put in as the chair of both the Environment and Energy Committee. They combined them back together again. And that's how I ended up kind of being the person to run with the RPS bill. And the first thing I did was, I needed to become, I needed to become a lot more educated in what our energy landscape looks like in Delaware. Who are the players? Who are the councils or commissions that you can go to kind of run some of these ideas past? And so I began doing a lot of homework on that. And I found that there really wasn't a particular group or department or commission or anything that you could really sit down and have a big policy discussion about? Like, what is Delaware's energy policy? Well, you would think that that'd be an easy question to answer, but if you don't have anybody that you can go to and ask that question, it's not an easy question to answer. What I found was, now being chair of the energy committee, I was having like 2 or 3 phone calls with all sorts of different groups every day. And so for a period of like, probably 2 or 3 weeks, every day I was on the phone with stakeholders that all had an interest, whether it was an environmental group that had an interest in wind or solar or nuclear, whether it was another group that was like a commercial group, because they did utility scale solar and they wanted to talk to me, or if it was a coalition of solar groups or a coalition of wind groups. It was crazy. You don't know how many people and how many groups are interested in all these. There were a lot of them. And it became really clear to me that I could be on the phone all day long talking to them and then going back and doing research as to who are they and what are they saying and what did they send to me and here's their report. So finally I was like, time out, stop. We need to have a forum where we can have a discussion as a group, because me just having one-off conversations with everybody is just not helping. I learn a lot more, and I think we do better policy when we're able to have experts in their own ways talking about a common issue, because then you get to see it from all the different viewpoints. That's how you come up with good legislation. That's how you figure out where the real problems are, and then how to kind of work together and where the decision points need to be on public policy. So what I did was I started these energy and climate forums. The first thing that I did was I went back and I looked to see all of the commissions and task forces and everything that the state had ever put together on either climate or energy. And I came up with a spreadsheet. I'm like, Madam Spreadsheet, I love Excel. So I've got all my little spreadsheets. And then I did who was involved in all of this, because we had 9 of them. And a lot of them, most of them aren't still working. But I got from that an idea of, at least from that sense, as to who has been involved in these issues in the past. And then I took note of all the people that I'd been talking to every day, for the last X number of weeks, because those are the ones that are really involved in this as well. And I said, okay, I'm going to invite all these people to have a conversation. And the first thing we're going to talk about is this RPS bill, number 1. But let's just look at RPS, and then we need to look at community solar, and then we need to look at wind. And then by that time, I'm figuring the climate action plan is going to be out and we can work on the climate action plan. So that's been my thought process. And I'm figuring that at some point as we go through this, it'll become clear who the stakeholder groups are that I need to then go back and engage on specific legislation. Like that's what we're doing right now with community solar. And so if we take a look back at the RPS bill, so I think your question was, so what happened with the RPS bill? Oh, we passed the RPS bill. It was on a much shorter time frame than I think was optimal, but it needed to be done in order to resolve a years-long lawsuit between the Department of Natural Resources and the Public Service Commission on who had the authority to freeze the rates of really the cost of renewables on people's bills. It's kind of a, it's hard to explain, but that's kind of high level as to what it was about. Because DENREC said they had the authority to freeze the amount of renewables and PS if it got too expensive. And the Public Service Commission said, no, they have the authority. And we have kind of a schizophrenic government when it comes to energy, because I think of energy and I don't see energy and the environment as being completely separate. I mean, there's a lot of overlap there. When you talk about energy, you can't help but then talk about the effects on the environment. But the way that our state government is set up, environmental issues are under the Department of Natural Resources, and energy issues are under the Public Service Commission. Those are completely different agencies. They're not the same people at all. They have their own set of regulations. They have their own meetings. They have their own buildings. I mean, these are very, very different groups. And there was this dispute between them as to who could freeze the percentage. So the lawsuit was going to be, the court had agreed that they were going to stop the litigation until the end of January, upon what the department had said, and the government was saying, we think we can get this resolved. We've come to an agreement with this RPS bill. There are provisions in there that now tie it to the market. And so we've all agreed to that. So if you'll just give us the opportunity to get this bill passed, then you can dismiss the lawsuit, which would be great, because then we can free up the attorneys to work on other things, and we can stop spending money to fight each other. So that's why that RPS bill went as quickly as it did. And it really was the same bill that Harris McDowell had put together back in 2019. Because in order to put together big pieces of legislation like this, you have to get a lot of people on the same page. And so he had gone through about a year, or actually 2 years, I'm finding out, of negotiations with all the different sides and players to get it at 40%. And everybody was happy with 40%, happy enough with 40%, that we could at least get that done in January and settle the lawsuit. Now, I'm not really happy with 40%. And I heard from a lot of other people that weren't very happy with 40% either. So what I said was, let's do the RPS bill, but let's look at then raising the 40% in the next bill, because we're not done with it yet. We hadn't even started to look at community solar yet, because we took that part out of the old bill. So that's what we're doing now. So I had the Energy and Climate Forum last week, I guess it was, on the community solar bill, where we're starting the drafting process. We took the old bill that Harris had put together. I know the Sierra Club and the RPS coalition of like 38 other groups had some comments. We kind of put them all in the same bill. I think you got a copy of the bill. You know, anybody who registered for the forum got a copy of the bill. And so we wanted to talk about, and you'll notice in there, we've raised the RPS up to 50%, which I think is something that we need to do. I also found that when we were doing the discussion of the RPS bill, that the University of Delaware and many of the folks that are kind of environmentalist in nature, but from the academic side, were very concerned that if we just went to a straight 50%, the way that it's a goal, but it gives you no roadmap to get there. And we're not, because we're not encouraging other types of renewables to the extent that we ought to be. Their concern was that we might make it a goal of 50%, but we're not really doing a good enough job at opening the door so the other renewables can get through. So that's why I thought it was a good idea to combine it with community solar, because in that way we know, okay, here's now a vehicle to increase renewables, and because we now have a vehicle, we can raise this level. Now, one of the things I found out in the process of doing a lot of this research is that it's a real public policy question of community solar versus utility scale solar, and some people call it commercial solar. So commercial solar or utility scale solar are large solar fields that are operated by a company. They come in, they install large solar fields, that energy is then generated, and that goes into the grid that's then distributed to everybody in that system. Let's say it's Delmarva Power. Community solar is solar on a much smaller level, where you have the actual community is in charge of that system. And so the community, the solar system is built. It's then hooked to those few hundred or however many houses, apartments, a congregation in a church, they're associated with it. And that they see the direct benefit from that system going forward on their bill. It's like they're in charge of it. It's not like there's a big utility in the middle of it. So here's the thing. We have probably 4 large community scale solar projects right now that are in the process of being approved and built in Delaware. And those are very big, and they are going to get us to the point where we reach all of our solar goals in this current legislation, and we'll probably reach them all in our next legislation. If what you want to do is go as quickly as possible to 100% renewables, the most efficient way to do it is through these large solar projects. But, and here's the question, but what that does is it doesn't give these smaller communities local control over their ability for their own solar. There's no requirement. These companies too, the whole idea of them going out and requiring low to moderate income folks to hook in, they don't really have any incentive to do. They're a business. They're a business. I mean, they're in there to make money. They're going to put up the system. They're going to get their people subscribed to it. They're going to make money, and then they're going to go. You know, they don't have any interest in it. So there's not a lot of local jobs in it. The jobs component is the installation of these smaller systems, the maintenance of the smaller systems. There's a lot more job creation with that. So there's but that's not going to get us to 100% renewables as fast. So it's this kind of a balance. Like, we want both of them, because I think you get to, particularly the diverse communities and the low to moderate income communities, and self-sufficiency, if like in your neighborhood, you get to that with the community solar. It's just not really fast to getting the state as a whole to its bigger goal of how much solar do you have in your renewable portfolio. The utility scale solar will, but they don't care so much about job creation. They don't care so much about low to moderate income subscribers. So I think there's a balance that we have to make. I'm not sure how we're going to address that in this bill. I'm not even sure if we need to address it in this bill. I'm not sure. So where the bill is right now is we had our big energy and climate forum last Friday. It rivaled the previous forum. We had over 200 people that registered for the forum. We had about 174 attendees, I think, at the highest point. So not everybody that registers comes, you know, surprise, surprise. But that's about the same that we had with the RPS bill before. So now I asked everyone to submit comments, and I think a number of you submitted comments here as well. And what I've done is I took all of those comments and I put them into, I've done an analysis where I've taken all the comments, and there were maybe, I don't know, about 60 comments or so. And they seem to fall out in various categories. There seemed to be a low to moderate income category. There was a, who has jurisdiction category, a jobs category. There was like 7 different categories of things. And I divided them all up in the categories, had each of them, each of the comments under those categories. And we're now going to the next phase of the revision of this bill. So the government entities, I've sent all of the comments along with different attachments that were made necessary as a result of the comments to DENREC, who is now meeting with the governor's office, the Public Service Commission, and the public advocate. And they're going to take a look at the comments and do, at least from the government perspective, their government perspective, changes to the bill, and they're going to send them back to me. And then I'm going to take that bill and distribute it to a larger stakeholder group of we had like 20 or so entities that were a part of putting together the last forum and that have expressed an interest. And we're going to take a look at all the public comments and go, okay, did we address them? Yes or no? If we did, where is it? If we didn't, why do we not address it? I mean, some comments are like, this is stupid, we shouldn't be doing this. Well, okay, and why? We're going to listen to you, but yeah, probably not going with that one, but just so that we know, that all the comments have been addressed. And then once we get the next stakeholder group meeting together and have any revisions from that, my plan is to take this out to a future energy and climate forum, just like we did the previous bill. So I would say it'll probably be at the end of April, maybe in May, when we get to that. And then we'll hear, okay, so this is where we started from. Here's what the bill looks like now. Are there any, further comments, questions, things that we haven't thought about? And then take that bill through the legislative process and get it hopefully passed by the Senate and the House and then signed by the end of June. So that's what we'll have with community solar. But at the same time, I mean, that's not the only thing that we're looking at energy-wise. We also have to look at wind. Like Delaware hasn't really looked at wind for a few years. And that's what the next Climate and Energy Forum is about. That one's coming up on, I'm looking at my calendar, February the 26th at 2:00. Just very similar, same format as the previous two that we've had. And like Delaware had an offshore wind working group in 2017. And its job was to look at the feasibility of offshore wind in Delaware and come back with a final report to the governor. And so they did that. And they found in that report that offshore wind was too expensive. At that point, natural gas was just out, it was just so much less expensive than wind and other things that it just swamped the discussion. And so that discussion of offshore wind really it stalled in 2018. I think it's time to bring it back up again. So because the price of wind has gone down so much that it may very well rival natural gas. And there's probably good reasons why we ought to be now bringing it back up and talking about it again. So the thought is that there's a group called the Offshore Wind Working Group that is housed at the University of Delaware. They've been looking closely into the issue of offshore wind. They were familiar with the previous task force on offshore wind. So I'm going to have them as one of the speakers. I'm working to have the federal government, the part of the federal government that deals with offshore wind issues, the Bureau of Ocean and Energy Management, I think it was. I'd like to have them there, as well as there's a company called Ørsted that's actually doing offshore wind now, and they have a wind farm off of Maryland that they're in the midst of getting together. I want them to be as part of the group talking about it. So, and then we'll go to the public comment section. So I think we'll be able to get to more public comments, but just like all the ones in the past, really, it is incredibly important that if you have public comments, that you email me the public comments or you put it in the chat box, because then that's how I coalesce all those comments and I put them into a report and I make sure we address them as we all go on. One of the things you probably don't know is that I have one staff person, I have one secretary, and it's me. So this being a state elected official is very, very different than being a federal elected official. So the federal government, as an elected official, they have an office staff, and they have researchers, they have policy analysts, and they have a lot of people that support them in their job. I have me, and I have my legislative assistant, Jen Parrish. And every once in a while, when school's like back in session, we can get legislative fellows from the University of Delaware that will help us out with some research. So that is really good too. So like when you email me, I read every one of your emails. I'm the one that's responding to your emails, unless I get swamped with stuff and I ask Jen, can you help me with some of the emails? Here's what we're doing over here. So that's just another thing, so that you know, this is local government right here. Very local. So that's it. I've talked for like a half an hour, Jack. So, if you want to ask me any questions, that's fine with me, but you got to be tired of listening to me.
I don't know. It's great. You're really knowledgeable on this stuff. It's great to hear. So one of the things I wanted to ask about is, I'm going to kind of go off script here. How would we incentivize companies to really invest in low income areas? You said they kind of have really no reason or interest to do that. So how would something that would be put in a bill kind of impact that?
Well, it's called carrots or sticks. So a stick is, we can put it in the bill that says, if you want your project approved and you need to get it through this Public Service Commission and blah, 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 your project must include X percentage of LMI residents, low to moderate income residents. That's a stick. Or we could say, we're going to credit you, you need to produce a certain amount of energy. And if you get, for one house, you get this amount of credit. But if that house is an LMI house, you get credit and a half. So we incentivize them that way. It's a discussion. It's a discussion that we need to have with industry as to which is more effective. And I think it needs to be in utility scale solar. I think it needs to be one of those two things. I would rather not do the incentive, only because I want us to get to the goal of 100% renewables quicker, sooner rather than later. So I don't want to double credit or credit and a half or anything like that for getting us to the goal. I really want us to just get to the goal. So that's kind of that's sort of my bias. Let me see how that works with how realistic that is, as we go through the discussion process. I'm very much a collaborative discussion process kind of person.
All right, I want to open it up to some other people too. I know a lot of other people wanted to ask questions. So Mallory, I think you were up first.
Yeah, so I was just wondering how a hybrid approach to community solar would be better than an all or nothing version. So by that I mean like having both private and state solar energy coming from, the state.
Well, I think that's really the heart of one of the things that we're talking about within public policy. I don't know. I can give you the pros and the cons, and I don't know kind of where that falls out right now. So the pro is that with a hybrid approach where it's not just a government authority, you have private actors, private industry that can come in quickly. There's not a lot of rules and regulations. They can put in the system. They can get people. They can get people connected quickly. They're very responsive because you don't have to go through a state agency. It's like you call up Delmarva Power on the phone or something like this. It's quicker, less bureaucratic. The con is there's not as much oversight. It's the whole question of consumer protection. So what happens when something goes wrong with that system? Because something's going to go wrong, right? And if the installer is responsive and that company is responsive, they're going to come out and they're going to fix it, and everybody's going to go on their merry way. But what if the installer isn't responsive? What if the installer, this happens a couple of years down the road, and the company that originally installed it and it's now owned by the community, what if that company's bankrupt? Who do you call? And who's responsible? Because now, if that system's not working now because the company's bankrupt, there's nobody that's overseeing it, and now you can't flip your lights on in your house, and your refrigerator's not working, and every second your freezer is melted. Who pays for that? Like, how does that get fixed? So I'm still really going back and forth about that. I can tell you, as an environmental attorney, I've had to deal with something similar like this in the wastewater context. So there are certain services that we need as a society that are critical services: drinking water, wastewater disposal, electricity, energy. I mean, these are essential services. It's not like your car is great and it's important, but it's not essential, right? But other things are very essential. So Newcastle County had for a really long time a rule that only government can run wastewater systems. So if you wanted to build a housing development and you wanted to get approval for that, and there wasn't a place for you to hook into the county sewer, then you couldn't build that housing development because you're not in the sewer district area. So you were going to have to do something else. You were going to have to build the houses so that they were on larger lots and didn't need sewer, but you weren't going to be able to build your own community sewer system. That change, that isn't the case in the two lower counties that we have. And that also changed for a period of time in Newcastle County, where there was a developer that came in. They wanted to build a housing development called Liera Farms. And they built Liera Farms, which is just south of the canal, near Summit Bridge. And they built it. They couldn't connect to the county sewer. So they're like, we're going to build our own community sewer system. We got people that know what they're doing, and we're going to be able to collect the money from the folks and then keep the system running, and it's going to be fine. You know, we're going to form a whole nother company that's going to do this, and they're going to do a great job. And so the county said, well, okay. And then it operated for a very brief period of time, and then it went belly up, and people couldn't flush, and it was really, really bad. And Newcastle County came back and they're like, no, we're not doing this anymore. If the government doesn't own this service and have some direct connection to it, you're just not going to be able to build a development with these systems again, because it's too critical for people in a whole community. All of a sudden, you can't run your dishwasher, you can't flush your toilet. I mean, how long are you going to be able to live with that? Not very long. And that same issue happens downstate right now. So what has happened in downstate is you have a number of smaller developments who have a community system, and that entity, the developer or the entity that he formed to run that system, they're just not running them anymore because they don't have an interest in it. It's gone bankrupt. It's, you know, so the government has had to step in once again, forming a nonprofit to then take over these systems. That's my concern. That's my concern with the hybrid model. What happens? It's not when things are going well that's the issue, and it's not an issue when something goes wrong, but you've got a responsive entity on the other end. The problem is when something goes wrong and the entity isn't responsive, there isn't anybody to call. Then what happens?
Yeah,
So,
that makes a lot of sense. Sorry,
yeah.
I didn't mean to cut you off.
No.
Yeah, it's just like I was just confused on kind of the approach to that and the factors weighing into it. So thank you so much for clearing that up. I wanted to say quickly that I do have to hop off. Unfortunately, I have a prior commitment that I could not cancel. But thank you so much, Senator Hansen, for coming to talk to us today. That definitely cleared up a lot of my questions, and it makes a lot of sense to me. So I'll pass it back over to Jack now to finish off the meeting. So thank you.
Thank you, Mallory.
All right, so I know Chastity had a question. So.
Okay, I wanted to ask, what is the next step for introducing a community solar bill to Delaware?
The next steps right now is I've asked the government folks, meaning DENREC, the Public Service Commission, the Public Advocate, and the Governor's Office. They're going to turn around a revised version of the community solar bill that was circulated prior to the last forum. That revised version is going to go to a larger stakeholders group to take a look at it to see if it's addressed all the questions and issues that were brought up at the public forum that we had. I expect there'll be another revision after that. And then we'll go back out to, I think, another large energy and climate forum for everybody to take a look at again to see, okay, here's where we are now. Is everybody okay with this? And then as soon as we get to, you're never gonna make everybody happy. You just need a critical mass, right? As soon as we feel like we got that critical mass and we can get this done, I'll be introducing it into the Senate first. It'll be a Senate bill under my sponsorship. Get it passed in the Senate, send it over to the House, get it passed in the House, and then the governor signs it.
All right, and then another Alex had another question.
Hi, my question was, how does the state plan on enforcing the plastic bag ban that was recently put in place? And would you consider removing the loophole of the thicker plastic bags being called reusable?
Yes, yeah, I noticed that too. That's like, wait a minute, how does this happen? This looks just like it did before. It's just these bags are a little bit thicker. Yeah, I noticed that. So, we would have to go back and take a look at the enforcement mechanism that was in the bill. So I don't know which agency was given the enforcement mechanism. It might have been the Department of Natural Resources, but I'm just not sure. So we'd have to go back. My guess is that there's going to be a period of time in which, they're going to give warnings to people that aren't following this. But I think that the sponsors and I are all going to be like, we're going to have another discussion about the workaround, because to me, it just feels like a workaround. I don't know that solved the problem with these larger recyclable bags. It's like balloons, there really aren't recyclable balloons either. So I've got a mass balloon bill that I'm working right now that is going to be fun. So yeah, believe me, I'm on that. I'm thinking the same thing that you are. I just don't like it when we go through the trouble, and it's a lot of trouble and difficulty to get bills passed, just to have the industry go sidestep right around it and do something that, wait a second, that is not the spirit or intent that we anticipated. I was just thinking about that.
And then I know Drew had one as well.
So I just wanted to ask, how will community solar impact electricity costs and bills?
How could it? Is that?
How will community solar impact electricity costs?
Well, the theory, and I think what they're seeing where they're actually using it now, is it should reduce the cost of energy in your bill. What we have right now is we have energy that costs more in Delaware. Our energy bills in Delaware are higher than they are in all of our surrounding states. And it's really unfortunate. I never take anything at face value. I'd heard that before, and I thought, yeah, you're just saying that because you don't want to do like renewables. You don't want to do blah, blah, blah. All you want to do is fossil fuels, right? So I asked for some research to be done. And the public advocate supplied me with a lot of research on the cost of bills, the cost of energy in Delaware, as opposed to other states, and the cost and the cost burden on households in Delaware at different income levels as opposed to other states. And ours is higher. So unfortunately, kind of what I thought were the naysayers and the kind of, the people that don't like renewable energy that were always fussing about, how high bills are in Delaware, they're right. But the reason that they're right let me take that. There's a light at the end of that tunnel. The reason that our bills are so high right now is because it's for two things. Number one is we are stuck in a number of long-term wind contracts where the price of wind, this is onshore wind from the west of us, onshore wind was very high. And so those contracts are going to go, I think they still run through 2026 or 2027. And we have the Bloom surcharge, which is the charge for Bloom energy that you've probably heard about as well. And that is, those two things together make Delaware's cost of energy higher than our surrounding states. And it's a higher burden on particularly low to moderate income households in Delaware than otherwise. Now that is all of those things they're going to continue to go up till about 2026, 2027, and then they start going down. And it's a steep decline. So what you're going to see by the time we get to, I think 2035, but well before that, the cost of the energy in Delaware is going to be much less. Those more expensive contracts that we can get out of will be replaced by things like community solar, utility scale solar, more cheaper wind, whether it's onshore or offshore. It's those old contracts that we're locked into that we can't get out of right now that's causing our energy bills to be so high.
And then I have one more kind of about the RPS bill. I'm sorry, I know I keep doubling back to that, but
What about invasive species? You got to get me on invasive species.
Oh yeah,
I'm gonna
yeah.
give me 5 minutes for invasive species at the end.
I got you. So I know you wanted 50% on that. I know a lot of people that were at the forums and the Senate committee hearing all wanted 50% on that. Could you kind of walk us through what the anti-arguments were and what some of the barriers were that we kind of faced when we were trying to raise it to that?
The biggest argument is it's going to cost too much because, or actually no, that was the argument for 40%. It was going to cost too much. The argument's always just going to cost too much, right? That's the go-to argument. But we actually had data to show with good projections that it wasn't going to be costly, and we're going to be still be paying much less than we're paying right now. So that the problem with going to 50% is that we don't know what it's going to cost. Unless we had a vehicle to get there, like through community solar or utility scale solar, where we can start to go, okay, we think it's going to cost about this, and we can make projections for the models to figure out what it's going to cost, that we don't know what it's going to cost. That's an even worse argument that it's going to be too expensive. When you have something, you go, oh, it's going to be $8, blah, blah, blah. That's too expensive. We don't know what it's going to cost. So that's scary. You can't get a bill like that passed. You just can't. So I think the best thing that we can do for getting to 50% is to get the vehicles in place for getting us there, which is going to be community solar, more emphasis on utility scale solar in particular, maybe offshore wind, or at least the thought of helping with, making it easier for offshore wind here. And at least that way you then know how we can get there and how much it will cost to get there using those vehicles. That, I think, is the best thing that we can do.
Yeah, that's really good. Anybody else have questions? That's a lot to unpack, so.
Okay. Do you want to do kind of 5 minutes on the loss of our native species? Because this is something else that I was not aware of, and you may not be aware of it either. So I thought that I was environmentally aware, right? With all the stuff I'd done at DenRec and then being an environmental lawyer. And I was on a committee that DenRec had put together, an advisory council that DenRec had put together. And there was Professor Talame from the University of Delaware was giving a presentation at one of the meetings. And he talked about how Delaware has lost 40% of its native birds, 40% of its native plants, 30% of its native and reptiles and amphibians, 20% of its native fish. It's like, I looked at that and I was horrified, because to me, it sounded like the collapse of the bottom half of our food chain. And that made me, first of all, I was horrified. I was shocked. I was scared. I thought, how can this even be? So when I first got into office, one of the first things I did was I formed what's called the Ecological Extinction Task Force, where we took Dr. Talamy's work, actually made him a member of the task force, along with business folks and environmental folks and other government folks, and to look into this question of, is this for real? Like, is this just, does this Dr. Talamy and his students kind of being alarmist, or is this actually for real? We found out that it is actually for real. And then what to do about it. So the task force came up with, like 80 different recommendations. It's caused by habitat loss, habitat fragmentation, climate change, and the invasive species. So one of the first things that this task force did was, after it came up with the 80 recommendations, you then have to come up with a way to have those recommendations implemented. So I formed the Delaware Native Species Commission, whose job it is to now implement those 80 recommendations from the Extinction Task Force. So if you actually Google, Delaware Native Species Commission, you'll see the commission that's put in place right now. And so now it's working down on all of those 80 recommendations of how to kind of turn the ship around. And one of the first things to do was to ban the sale of invasive plants, invasive species. I mean, and if you want to know what an invasive species is, in the springtime, when you see those beautiful those trees with the white blooms on it, there's like hardly anything else out. They're like around your neighborhood and they're in the shopping center. That's called a Callery pear or a Bradford pear. If you also go drive down Route 40 or Route 1 up and down, they completely cover the banks there. None of those were planted there. The reason that Callery pears or Bradford pears are invasive species, they didn't originate here. They were brought here by the government or landscape planners back in the 50s and 60s, because they bloomed quickly, bugs didn't eat them, and so they grew fast. And aren't they beautiful? Well, the fact that bugs don't eat them should have been a clue. They don't form part of the food, that they're not food for our ecology here, our system here. And so they outcompete everything. They're all over the place now. And if you try to cut one down, a bunch of them come up from around the roots, and they've already made their way over into the field next to you with the seeds that they have. So that's just one example of many, many invasive species that we currently have here that I have photos. I would love to come and do my presentation to you guys. In fact, I want to get on your list. I want to do my presentation because it's a PowerPoint that I have. And I'm like, so here's what English ivy looks like in your yard when you plant it. And here's what it looks like in the woods next to you, because now it's an invasive species and what it looks like. Have you ever seen in the woods, you've seen the ivy that's growing up the trees like this? Yeah, it's not supposed to be, it's an invasive species. That it came with us, with the colonists came over from England in the 1700s. They brought English ivy. So you wouldn't think that invasive species are, well, that's new stuff. No, a lot of it is stuff we've gotten used to because it's been here for such a long time. And we think it's really pretty and it grows so well because nothing eats it. So we've ended up in a situation where we've gotten rid of the food at the plant level. So because there's less food at the plant level, there's less insects. Because there's less insects, there's less birds, there's less small mammals. The whole thing is collapsing. That's why. That's the short story of it. I would be happy to come in and do my presentation to you at any point in the future. And it's great. It's really great because I give it all over the place. And it's really like aha moments because people are like, I've seen that. I didn't know that one was invasive. I've seen that before. Now you know what it means.
Oh yeah, we'd definitely love to have that.
Okay.
Also, there's another group, Extinction Rebellion. It's another youth group that's like really into ecological stuff as well. I can put you in contact with them if you'd like some more to run through some extra practice with them.
I'd love to. Yeah. Before COVID, I was doing this presentation like 2 or 3 times a month to different groups. I was doing it to DENREC and master gardeners, and then I was giving it at lots of schools, a lot of different schools, public schools and private schools throughout Delaware.
Yeah, that's a lot of stuff I honestly didn't know. Those are really sobering numbers too.
Yeah.
So does anybody else have any questions? All right, I think we're good then.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me. I really
Yeah.
appreciate it. And it's really great to be able to see you all and put names to faces that I've been hearing from. So feel free to contact me at any time, no problem at all. I think if I want to get information to you, like I think I talked to Jack before, just tell me who to send stuff to, and then you can distribute it among your group. I can send it to you personally as well. It just makes it a little easier if I can send it to a handful of people, but whatever. Because it's just
Yeah.
me and Jen.
Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate you taking the time to come out. This was huge. I think we learned a lot. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me, and I'll be talking to you soon.
All right, thank you.
All right, bye-bye.